Can you see the idolatry of singularity here? We are going to make ourselves immortal. We are going to give ourselves the power to live forever. Now make no mistake, I pray along with every single one of you that guided by God's hands, scientists will somehow, some way, be able to slow or even stop cancer's war on humankind. That innovative research will put an end to the ravages of Parkinson's or ALS. That we will advance as far with most of our dreaded diseases as we have with the treatment of HIV, where it is no longer considered to be a death sentence, but rather a disease that can be managed. But for all of us, the words of the hymn writer will prove true. Time, like an ever-rolling stream, will bear us all away. Listen to me now, lest you think I'm a doomsday. While I am confident that the moment will come when Jesus and I will meet face to face, I would rather that moment not come anytime soon. That's why I go to the health club and bike and swim. That's why I drink only in moderation, eat good foods in reasonable proportions, and in general take care of myself. It's not in the goofy belief that if I live long enough, someone will be able to join my mind into a computer somewhere so that I can spend eternity as an iPad. The reason for living is that Kurzweil and his cronies miss is that we live to serve God. We live as a people who have discovered with St. Paul that the wisdom of this world is foolishness to God. And the cover story of Newsweek is closer to that than that of Time. Theirs was about the Arab Revolution of 2010 that has caused such upheaval in Middle Eastern nations that many of us worry not whether we will make it to 2045, but if this all breaks the wrong way, we won't make it through the next 6 years together. Striving for peace makes striving for eternity seems like a piece of cake. And Jesus tells us why. It is because people still have an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth mentality. Feuds carry on for thousands of years between people who claim to be religious. Shiites and Sunnis strive for control because each believes that their group is the genuine successors to Muhammad. Arabs and Israeli both lay claim to the land God gave them and only them. Who cares if we become immortal by 2045? It won't mean a thing unless those words from Leviticus prove true. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus calls us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And I must confess to you that I don't know how to do that very well. There are people who I can barely think of without becoming angry. And the only way I know how to deal with them is to turn them over to God. To ask God to help me with them. To commend both of us to God's care, my enemy and myself, that we might both be better people. Jesus tells us that a good life is not always a long life, but it is a life lived in peace. Peace with God and peace with one another. I have often told you that Christianity is not easy. It is far easier, I think, to dream of the day when you and your laptop will become one and live on forever. It's far easier to fight against the ravages of aging than it is to share with your neighbor. It's far easier to worry about whether we will make it than to help out a neighbor with even less than we have. Jesus is not calling us to live our lives an easy way, but rather to live our lives God's way. Way back when I was in seminary, one of my roommates pasted a sign on the shower door of all places that said, "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." To this day, I do not know what he was getting at. But I do know this. That is not the sign to see when one gets up in the morning. Hair, I was still actively trying not only to keep mine, but to keep mine perfectly coiffed at the time, was all askew. I needed to shave. I felt grungy. Maybe the sign was there to remind me to look in the mirror and remember that I was mortal. And maybe it was there to remind me that all I had and all I was in this life is a gift from God. That, and the fact that my life would not go on forever. So my job became that of doing all the good I could in the time I had left. Ponce de Leon may have heard the fable, and even if he looked, we know he never found the fountain of youth. Chances are very high that Prince Wild and his kind won't live forever either, at least in the way they envision their lives. But we have a promise that we can bet our lives, our eternal lives, on. It comes from the inspired pen of St. Paul, who writes, "All things are yours, whether the world, or life, or death, or the present, or the future, all belongs to you. And you belong to Christ. And Christ belongs to God. And it will be so forever, with or without the aid of a computer."